I've been muted, so it can be so Steve.
So, is Paul feeling better?
He's still in bed today.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, where's Wolfgang?
Well, he was going had to move his beers with the boys up a day.
You're on microphone, by the way. Sorry.
Just start starting.
We just unmuted, so you're welcome.
That's first. You're adding your best.
Oh, good. I'm thinking we should. Yeah, I think if you want to go for it. Think so? Yeah. It's 5 after, like. It's on.
We're still better than me, and we're up. So, trying to get our numbers today. So, welcome to the 187th meeting of the Vermont Historical Society. Who can get the actual date we were founded quickest? Oh, you're a numbers person, yeah. You can see that. So we have graduated with VHS.
Yeah,
And we are back quite a year. I guess I started by saying it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I'll start with the worst of times because we've had an entire big year. We've had, floods, we've had COVID, but this is the first year we've had grants that have already been given to us go away. I mean, that's not something you usually think once you get a grant, it's solid, but that was not the case. Luckily, we were able to bill for an IMLS, Institute of Museum and Library Services grant, just under the wire for our book about the experience of people having of COVID in Vermont. So we were lucky there, and we had another grant for a wonderful Iron project called Activating 21st Century History Local Training Program, which was helping local historical societies to learn how to access and present and improve their collections. And that one, we had hired a wonderful person to run it. And we faced her being fired down. The two loyal donors stepped up. So the problem was the project was saved through the fall, but there's a lot of scrambling around, trying to deal with the ramifications of having a government that doesn't value cultural institutions enough to fund them. But you can't keep a good historical society down, and in many ways, it's been also the best of times. We've had a wonderful year with staff, volunteers, and donors uniting to accomplish great things. We had the biggest Vermont History Day ever, which was incredible in April. Over 330 students participated at our new home at St. Michael's College, where we have a lot of room to stretch out and put all the different things. They did papers, performances, exhibits, websites, documentaries, and they can do it on any subject or era. So we have everything from World War II to the death of some rock star to, we had a lot of variety, and there's always witchcraft, everyone loves witchcraft, but it's really, really pleasant to see what interests them from year to year. They're changing cornucopia of subjects. And I love being a judge because you get to talk to the kids about their work and I just love having been a history nerd myself. I love, not that our kids are, but I love just seeing all the enthusiasm they have and how it lights a real spark. And a lot of kids who come to take part in it. So that was a real high point for me of the year. And around this time last year, we finished our new research and exhibition gallery, which is right across the hall near the History Center in Barrie. And Steve and the collections team spent months and months working on this great project. And it lets us show more over 30,000 objects in our collection on a rotating basis. So for those of you who are in the building today, you can pop in there before you go and take a look. And those who aren't here, please drop in someday, because it's kind of a jewel box of interesting historical things. It's not an exhibit, and so much as kind of change different themes and have the objects from that theme highlighted in different exhibition spaces. And then we also have these drawers you can pull out. It's kind of a fun thing to do. Just go around the room and pull out these drawers and see what you find. And some of the stuff is really surprising. And we have paintings like the painting racks and the flipping paintings. It's just really a fun time. So drop in and take a look. And the Activating 21st Century Local History Training Program is continuing, as I told you, and it has been a huge success, teaching local historical society members the professional standards to use to organize their collections. And people have this fussy view of local history, but that is not the case here in Vermont. People are really interested in professionalizing their collections, and they really care about them. And there are some wonderful, wonderful objects all over the state, and that are getting the kind of care they deserve through this. We also published a book this year that I suspect will become more and more popular as time goes by, called Life Became Very Blurry, an oral history of COVID-19 in Vermont, edited by Garrett and Graff, drawing from over 100 local oral histories taken by our staff. Graff illuminates several themes that emerged from their experiences of the pandemic. I've heard people say, I'm not ready for this yet. I'm not ready to read it quite so soon, because it was a painful time for all of us. But if that's you, get your copy now, because the day will come when you want to get it out and be reminded of what it was like. You are going to want it someday. The Vermont History Museum in Montreal this year hosted one of the most successful exhibits we've ever had. For the Love of Vermont, the Lyman Gordon Collection. It featured over 200 important works of art on Vermont themes, at once beautiful and thought-provoking. It was a real highlight of our history. We also have a program called Vermont Eats every year, where we examine one of Vermont's many ethnic groups through their cuisine. And this year we did one of Vermont's biggest groups, French Canadians. And it was wonderful. It was over at the Green Mountain Technology and Career Center in Hyde Park, and they have a wonderful, wonderful culinary arts program over there. And they brought students over here to our building here to do research on foodways, on French Canadian foodways. And then they cooked us this magnificent dinner. It was just superb. And Bill Schuldice gave a very entertaining talk, and we had musicians filling for us, and it was a deep dive into a very special Vermont. And but every single day, the staff of the VHS conserves our historical objects. They lead school groups. They sell books in our bookshop. They work with local historical societies. They maintain our buildings. They find fresh new ways to bring historical insights to people all over the state. And so we keep fighting the good fight, no matter what's going on around us. And so I guess the moral of these stories is that even in challenging times, nothing is going to keep us down. We believe in facts. We believe in the value of history to help people better understand themselves and their communities. We feel America has never needed that more. Because it doesn't matter, where you're coming from in your ideology, almost everyone is interested in the history that they live with every day. And our staff and volunteers work to preserve and interpret that past for the benefit of the present. So cheers to the Vermont Historical Society. Thank you. To turn to ask if Carl who found. And because we're going to the governance committee, the governance committee has been hard at work on bylaw changes. And I'm going to ask Carl to tell people a little bit about the doing time. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. From the interesting and stimulating, now go to the dull and but we do have to have rules on how we govern the society. They are our bylaws. Our bylaws are always subject to change as developments occur. This time around, the primary changes are to the composition of the board. We've finally come to realize maybe we're more efficient if we're slightly smaller. So the board now will be a slightly smaller board, but hopefully a more effective board. The other changes are primarily grammar and style. I'm more than willing to respond to any questions, listen to any comments, tell us some jokes.
Any questions? If not, I will ask Carl to go from.
Wait, Jan,
Oh, sorry, did we have?
we need to follow. The majority of our attendees are actually online, so we just need to make sure we've got any questions.
Any questions online?
Not seeing any yet. I'm gonna.
Yes.
I'm just curious on the size of the board is going from what to what.
That's a secret. Going down to
24.
one by four. That's still a pretty big board.
Yeah.
It was 24 plus 5. Yeah, the main change is that trustees will be, or that officers shall be trustees. That was the change. In the previous bylaws, officers did not necessarily have to be trustees.
So these have been rolled in. So can I ask you for a motion to accept bylaws as presented?
So moved.
Okay. And is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any more further discussion on this subject? Or are we finished with it? Okay, I will all in favor say aye. All right. Can we see online what's happening? Are they saying aye?
We are having votes currently so far. 16 out of 16 who voted, have said aye.
Said aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, I presume, unless there's a huge flood of,
The mail-in ballots were unanimous in approval.
okay, so I think we're good. Thank you very much. It was a long slog getting to bylaw changes. We're very happy to see this come to a conclusion, and I think they are good ones. And the other thing the governance committee does is to, put forward slates of trustees and officers for the coming year. So I'll turn that part over to Carl.
Thank you, Janet.
Advance those.
You see for the, on the screen in the room or on your computer, the, candidates for 3-year term on the board. Some are holdovers who have already served, some are new. Interesting, the new one at the top of the list is our current president. Who really isn't new at all, but because of the change that you just adopted for the bylaws, she will now serve a term. If you so choose. I can read the names. You can probably read the names as well as I can, and you might not butcher that kind of thing. So, Madam President, I move the slate of candidates that appear on the screen for a 3-year term as trustees.
Do we have the seconds? Okay, thank you very much. All in favor? Aye. We have a vote coming in again?
That's coming in currently. It's all in favor of the 15 who voted so far.
Okay, and
All mail-in ballots were in the approval of the listed trustees. They were unanimous.
okay, all in favor, say aye.
They just did.
Turn to our super duper treasurer, Dawn Schneiderman, who is going to give us the treasurer's report.
Hello, can you hear me, everybody in the room and those under screens? If you have one takeaway, and I'm not going to go into too much detail on finance because I think it only surpasses bylaw changes in terms of its interest. But I think we'll walk away with one thing, is that VHS remains financially solid. Not that it's easy, not that we don't have to scrap things together to do all the great work that we do, but we do have a solid foundation underneath us. As you can see here in our statement of position, our assets far away exceed our liabilities. We really only have one primary liability, which is our mortgage. On the asset side, we have 2 primary assets. One is the building that we're all enjoying here today, which is where our collections are housed, our library, and all of our administrative people work here. And then our investments, which primarily represents our endowment. I would characterize our endowment as modest. We would love for it to be larger. Yeah. Would like to partake, but it really contributes to the long-term stability of the society. It provides a modest annual income for us that we can run on every year. And in the event that we do have small ups or downs in our cycles, endowment really just is there for stability and the long-term health of the society. We move on to the next slide, which is slightly more interesting. Hopefully many of you can see bits and pieces of the society on the screen here. The one big takeaway here, if you look at our revenue and expenses, they're well balanced. We certainly don't want to be spending more than we're taking in any kind of material way. The thing that I find most interesting as I look at these 2 bar charts, and they are circle charts, is that it really reflects my strong feeling that the society really does a great job allocating our financial resources to the benefit of the society, the long-term health of society and the members. So if you look, almost 2/3 of that chart are things that are really outward facing things, whether it's public programs, collections, the kinds of things that we're here to serve. They're core to our mission. See if I had anything I wanted to say on the expense side. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that was early on, as Jan was talking about, when the current administration was withdrawing monies from many different organizations, many important organizations in Vermont lost significant funding. And so I wrote, Steve, what others on the board would have questions from people. So how is that loss of grant funding impacting the society? Is it going to be a big deal? And I would say, any loss of funding for us is a big deal. But in terms of delivering on our core mission and our ability to continue to do the kinds of things that we do, I would say that we certainly will continue with our mission. You can see that while grants sort of on the lower left there are a piece of our revenue stream, we're fortunate that it's not the predominant piece of our revenue stream. The kinds of sort of special above and beyond kinds of things that we've been really fortunate to do, the new research and exhibition gallery, some of the projects that Jan was talking about, many of those are significantly funded through grants and are the kinds of things that in the coming environment, we may not have the same kinds of opportunities to pursue some of those things. We may need to look to our membership, or we certainly are pursuing other grants, but they're just not available in the dollar as they were previously, and as regularly available as they were previously through the federal. See if there's anything else I wanted to say here. I think that's it. So the last message that I want to leave, I know that everybody here in the room, and I presume everybody on the phone, has a real soft spot in their heart for the Historical Society and Vermont. I mean, I sort of think it's, you really love Vermont and you really love history, and those two things come together. And here we have this wonderful organization. And with the loss of grant revenue and the challenges of many organizations pursuing similar sources of funding, member support is all the more important. If anybody here could find a little way to give a little more, we certainly could use it. As I said, the kinds of one-time initiatives that are sort of the bigger and the more flashy and impactful things are probably going to slow down a bit. There are many ways to give. You one-time giving. You can become an annual sustaining type giver. I'm not quite sure I'm using the right words, but you make a pledge and you sort of every year you meet your pledge. Everything helps. It's easy to do. You can go to the website. You can call our great development staff. We've got Daphne here today. Write a check. And so if anybody's thinking in their hearts to do that, we would certainly love that. But bottom line, we're in a financially solid position. I'm really excited about the future of the society. We've got the 250th upcoming, both at the federal and state level, which is going to trigger lots of great stuff coming. You'll see coming your way from the Historical Society. I think it's going to be a great upcoming year, and I couldn't be more enthusiastic. So I think I also have a little question and answer opportunity. If there is anybody who has a question, feel free or on the phone. Oh, we've got a question.
Something you said made me think of this, and I haven't had a chance to research it. Can you make membership renewal online, or do you still have to mail it in?
I'm going to say I'm 99% sure you can do it online, but I'll double check it with that.
You can absolutely do it online.
Okay, yes.
I heard the other day that nobody under 35 has a checkbook anymore.
Not sure we do this, a sustainer, like public radio does here in Vermont. Do we have that?
We have our Freedom and Unity Circle, and we ask people to make 3-year pledges so that it's an ongoing gift to the society.
Stinger thing, it's monthly. You know what you're getting, and it goes until it doesn't.
We do have that
And we
option.
have that option, yes.
Because that's an easy thing.
Yeah.
But at time.
And that's easily accessible on the website. So if you go to the online giving portion of our website, you can sign up for a monthly giving. And ideally at the Freedom and Unity level over multiple years.
Oh, this is terrific. I rarely get a question.
Percent state appropriations, has
Yeah.
that been consistent over many years? Expecting that it will continue, but
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes, it has continued for many, many years, and we do feel reasonably confident with it. Steve is the one who works with the folks over at the state and meets with the budget director and legislators and so forth. So
Yeah.
I took this way to get a slightly more complete answer.
And I realize shouting answers from my chair doesn't help people online hear what that answer is. It's a very good question. Vermont Historical Society has been funded at about that level, maybe a little bit less actually in the past from the state of Vermont. It's an interesting relationship between Vermont Historical Society and the state. Vermont Historical Society was created by act of the legislature in 1838. And then throughout the years, there have been a number of statutes that govern specifically what Vermont Historical Society does. As we all know, Vermont is a very small state. It doesn't have some of the built-in state agencies that larger states would have. Think of a state museum, something like that. And so Vermont Historical Society provides that role for the state, and that's the agreement with them in how we receive an appropriation. There's a lot more details on how we treat our staff and things like that that are all related to staff. So there's a number of statutes. I guess the answer is there's a number of statutes that govern what we do, but in exchange, we do receive state appropriation. It is not guaranteed. Every single year we have to put in a request, generally following the governor's guidelines, and we actually started that. Our budget request for FY 27 has already been submitted. We then meet with budget and finance, and it's a long process. The governor puts what the governor recommends in their budget. We then have to testify to appropriations. Sometimes the money goes up. Well, a few times the basket went down. Other times it remains the same. So, how can you help as members? I think that's where I want to go with this. Is to advocate with your representation, with your representatives and your state senators to support the appropriation to the Vermont Historical Society and make sure that it is not reduced. If there is ever a case where it is reduced and we need to do a push to our elected officials, we will let all of you know so that you can assist us with that.
Thank you, Steve. Any other questions? Yes?
Confused, like how is Vermont celebrating its 250th anniversary of the country, our independence.
Yeah, that's another good question. I'm gonna also put that one over to Cindy.
I'm just gonna punt on that for a little bit because I'm gonna touch on it a bit in my remarks, and also some of our staff will be touching on it. I covered some of it in my written report, and I'll also go to our website for Vermont Historical Society. We have a whole page dedicated to all the programs that we're doing for the 250th. There is a commission, there is a Vermont State Commission for how Vermont commemorates the 250th of our country. Here's an advocacy thing for you that is currently not funded. It's never been funded. So there's a state commission, but it has no funding. So it advocates for independent groups to do programs around the 250th, but the state commission at this point is not funding, does not have funding to do programming. So I'll talk about it a little further. I know Eileen and Amanda are going to touch on it as well, so we'll get to it.
Just thinking, because I'm from New Hampshire, but I've always seen Vermont as the conscience of the nation.
with the situation that the nation is in right now, that it might be an opportunity for Vermont to present its conscious of this. Why it delayed in entering.
There may be some, as I look forward to leaving my talk, that you may be interested in here. Also, just as a note, the Vermont Commission, unlike the National Commission, as constructed, is both for 2026 and 2027. And so leading into 2027 as well, and looking at the Vermont Constitution, the birth of the Vermont Republic. And so we'll look forward to programs and learning about that. So.
Great, thank you very much.
Going to let you in on a secret. The Vermont Historical Society has one overarching secret weapon, making all of these things you're hearing about today happen and work and keep going forward. And that is the person I think is the greatest head of a cultural organization in Vermont, maybe farther afield than that as well. And that is our incredible executive director, Steve Perkins. He And so I talk to everyone on the staff and I, look at all the things he has done and, he is a beloved boss. And there are just so many wonderful things being said about him from every aspect of the organization, and he deserves every one of them. And he's been through the floods, he's been through COVID, he's been through the stuff going on now, and he handles everything with such professionalism and such kindness and such support for everybody. He is amazing and we are so lucky to have him, and now you are lucky to hear from him as your friend.
Embarrassed. Well, thank you, Jan. Actually, thinking back that right around this time, 10 years ago, I was off this position at the Vermont Historical Society. So going on a decade of service to this organization, and I thank all of you for that. So thank you. I wrote down here, welcome everybody online. I just want to keep recognizing those online, not ignoring you to speak to the people in the room. And I'm very apt to do this. You get to see my best side when I do that. Okay. But anyway, I actually fully wrote out my remarks this year. And as most of you know me, sometimes I go and just ramble a bit, but I thought it was important based on what I wanted to say to write it down. So, but thank you, Dan. Thank you for your excellent and succinct summary of our past fiscal year, and Don and Carl. And I do look forward to presentations from Eileen and Amanda. So you are going to get a lot more detail about the operations of the society and our programs that we really do the good work that we do from Eileen and Amanda. So you can live through me, or you need to live through my talk here until you get to their presentations. So I want to also make a note that we've lost a number of individuals closely associated with the Vermont Historical Society this year. And specifically, I would like to recognize the contributions of Mike. He was the past director and until his death, editor of Vermont History, the Journal of the Vermont Historical Society. So over 40 years of service to this society for Michael. His scholarship and quiet guidance be greatly missed by all of us, both here at the Historical Society and in the Vermont history community. A special double issue of Vermont History, the journal which he edited up until his death, recently came off the press, and I apologize for the U.S. Postal Service if anyone hasn't received it yet. It did mail last week. We do have copies here as well if you'd like to grab one. It is a beautiful edition. Thank you, Alan Berelsheimer, who stepped in as interim editor of the journal, was able to pull this together for us. And then there is a tribute to Michael
within that issue of the journey. So please, take time with that. Also, over the past couple of years, we've reported to you on water infiltration into this building. Some related to general repair needs on our 130-plus-year-old building, and others necessitated by aerial flooding that compromised this building's drainage system. I am happy to report that with an appropriation from the state's capital bill this year, we can start phase one of the badly needed repairs. We're actually starting in a few feet. Contractors will be digging up almost all of the drainage around the foundations of this building, as well as restoring portions of the brick facade and replacing segments of the roof. I will warn you, it may look very extreme during construction, but we plan on being open for business throughout construction. So Jeff, bear with us on wayfinding, follow the signs, we'll get into the building and we'll help you. Also, speaking of wayfinding, in conjunction with this work, we'll also be upgrading signage throughout the campus of this building in an attempt to make this massive and complex building easier to navigate visitors. In constructing my remarks today, I started with a script based on my written report of the annual report. However, we as an institution and industry are being bombarded daily by unprecedented attacks on our work, our integrity, and our funding. So instead of speaking about our plans for the 250th anniversary of the US, which you can read about in my written report and on our website, I want to take a few moments to reflect on the mission of the Vermont Historical Society. Vermont Historical Society believes understanding the past changes lives and builds better communities. Our purpose is to engage Vermonters and Vermonters at heart with outstanding collections, statewide outreach, and dynamic programming. I'd like to repeat that first sentence. Vermont Historical Society believes understanding the past changes lives and builds better communities. This single statement is incredibly powerful and so very important to our communities, our state, our nation, and our world today. In crafting this statement, the society and you as members made a very specific word choice. The word choice I've highlighted in green, understanding. We purposely did not use words like celebrating, vilifying, complicating, simplifying, or any of these other words you hear flying about today. Why? Because understanding truly defines the role of the historian, either professional, amateur, or enthusiast. Understanding has a number of meanings that all apply to this statement. It can mean at its simplest comprehension. To tease that out a little bit, comprehension is the power to make experience intelligible by applying concepts or knowledge. Understanding can also be an adjustment of differences, or to create a harmonious relationship. As an adjective, understanding can mean being tolerant or sympathetic. Because we're a historical society, to be historic, the 18th century definition of understanding is learning or being informed. I think you can see where I'm going with this. History is not neat and tidy with one dominant narrative. It's a continuum of human experience interpreted and understood by diverse people with diverse worldviews. This is okay. And in fact, this is the power of our work. When our youngest learners visit the museum in Montpelier, we start every visit by asking them to be historians. As they move through the museum or their special program, we ask them to think about what they see, what they don't see, and what they would add. I recently received a statement from the National Council for the Social Studies, National Social Studies Teachers Organization, in response to a proposal of federal funding to be withheld from schools that do not adhere to a patriotic social studies curriculum based on Western civilization and Judeo-Christian values. The statement that they provided was co-signed by almost every major legacy history association in the country. In part, they say, the teaching of U.S. history should invite discussion, encourage inquiry, and reflect the diverse people, places, and events that shape our shared human experience. A strong social studies education helps students develop the ability to analyze information, engage in meaningful discourse, and contribute thoughtfully to their communities. As I read that, I thought, well, in more concise words, what are they saying? They're saying, we believe understanding the past changed lives and built better communities. The American Historical Association, our nation's historical society, as created by an act of Congress, made this following statement in response to the auditing of national museums and parks. Words matter, precision matters, context matters, expertise matters, democracy matters. We can neither deny what happened nor invent things that did not happen. The Vermont Historical Society will continue to support the understanding of history, as we truly believe this understanding changes lives and builds better communities. We will do this through our actions, not just our words. Thank you so very much for indulging me, and thank you for your unwavering support.
You would immense, and those are very important words for today. And now we're going to have a presentation of the Hathaway Award, and that is one of our biggest awards. And I'm going to call on board member and collections and research committee chair Peter Gilbert to come up and introduce the winner.
Richard O. Hathaway Award is presented annually to an individual, group, organization, or organization recognized as making an outstanding contribution to the field of Vermont history. Projects may include, but are not limited to, publications, exhibits, works of art, documentary films, radio programs, websites, and dramatic works. The award is dedicated to the memory of Richard O. Hathaway, whose work, lifelong work, teaching Vermont history was an inspiration to his colleagues and to the many students he taught and mentored both inside and outside academia. Richard Hathaway's career did much to broaden and deepen understanding of Vermont history, and the Hathaway Award seeks to do the same thing. The Hathaway Award is awarded to projects which inform and enlighten the audience about Vermont history, are creatively conceived and skillfully produced, are historically accurate and well researched, reach a popular, preferably wide and diverse audience, and which help to preserve or document Vermont history. This year, we're excited to present the Hathaway Award to the producer of a wonderful short film entitled Love of the Land, the tragic story of Vermont farmer Romaine Tenney. Members of the committee felt this film hit all the criteria for the Hathaway Award in a profound and far-reaching way. It speaks to a moment in Vermont history when our state's internal and external relations were dramatically changed by the establishment of the interstate highway system. And more broadly, it speaks to a moment between tradition and modernity, when Vermont's agricultural economy and culture were forever changed. The film is creatively conceived, skillfully produced, well-researched, and designed to create a powerful impact on a wide audience. It is with great pleasure that we present this year's Hathaway Award to Travis Ballstein.
Thank you. I am honored to receive this award. I have to do some thanks before I can say anything more. Thank you, Steve and the Vermont Historical Society, for even watching my film and seeing what it was all about. I want to say thank you to the Wethersfield Historical Society, in particular Patty and DeForest, who helped me connect with the subject matter and learn more about it. I also want to say thank you to Vermont Public for airing it, and being supportive for it. Thank you to the 400 plus Vermonters that came out and saw it in movie theaters. Thank you to the film festival, all that type of stuff. I'm just really very grateful, and very touched and honored, of how far this has come. And I think it really shows the power of Romaine Tenney's story. It's 61 years since his passing. The film came out last year for the 60th anniversary of his passing. I was really excited after the film to be able to do a historical presentation, people in the audience, then engage with question and answers. Fantastic discussions were held and had, and it was very touching. I also can't forget to thank the Tenney family themselves. I did a screening in Springfield, Vermont, which is close to Ascutney where the events took place. His family came, and I was very touched that they were there to see the film and share their appreciation for it. So thank you very, very much.
Going to screen, it's a short film, we're going to screen 3 films.
The farm sit on 90 years past the river, a smaller catch base, has a 10-acre woodlot. Cut would eat my home in the wintertime. A spring I got for drinking water, brook where I can fish, an orchard for my seasonal crops, and sweeping views of the valley below everything I need. I'm one of 9 children. After my father passed away when I was 14, my mother left to raise all of us and run the farm. Over the years, my brothers and sisters all left the farm, but I was the one that stayed. I've been happy here my entire life. I'm almost 64 years old now, and I've kept the place just like it was when I was a boy. No electricity and no gas powered machinery, not even a tractor or a car. Some people don't understand living this way without modern conveniences. Well, it's just the way I like the farm. Simple and peaceful. It's all for the love of the land. Each day pretty much starts the same. My dog and I have our breakfast. And then we're off to the barn. I got a small herd of cows, and every morning we start with the milking. I milk each of my cattle by hand. There's something about taking time with my hands. I like the simplicity of tending to each other. I know one, and they know me. My afternoons are mostly spent on my land, depending on the time of year. I might be cutting firewood with an axe or saw, in the field with the horses, and maple sugar. Each night when it starts getting dark, I light my kerosene lamp and return to the cow barn to milk all the cows again. After that, I mostly stay up late just tinkering with things by the light of the lamp. First, that goes in that state. A new interstate highway, built. It was gonna run from Connecticut to Canada. See, my land was in the path of progress. I said no to their money and went to court. A jury decided that I should get more than I was offered, that I would never accept any amount of money for my home, where I was born, grew up, farmed, and loved. Supposed to be off my big. Well, I haven't moved. Highway construction's been moving and it is coming in fast. The road crews are down about 100 yards from my house in none of my fields and pastures. And bulldozers are all over that place. My neighbors, friends, and family work that way. They keep offering help. They've been pleading with me to have take on my errands, help raise money for new house for me, or to even have me move in the summer. Well, I appreciate their offers. I'm not accepting any help. This is my home. 64th birthday. Go on. And today is my last day on my farm. Everything I love is about to be lost. But I know what's going to happen to my land. Be blasted, bulldozed, and paved. It will become a place that cars to drive. But what I don't know is how I would live without it. In the afternoon, the sheriff and his deputies arrived at the corridor. As I watched from a distance, I started to clear the fire, to shed it all from my tools and equipment are stacked tall piles. It's too much for me to watch. I realized that for the first time in my life, I had forgotten about my cows today. And never couldn't talk anymore. I let my hands loose. Once they were safe, I lit my bars on fire. After that, I left my dog outside and went into my home for the last time. Then I set my house on fire.
It's such a beautiful, sad story, and such a beautiful piece of work. And Travis, thanks so much to him. It's a real gift to Vermont, this story, and it's so Vermont. So thank you. And, it's hard to move on with the program after that. But we did so, and we're now going to have a talk from Eileen Corcoran, who is our Director of Service and Outreach. And she's going to tell us what's going on around the state this year.
Thank you. I didn't realize I put myself in this spot, so. Hopefully, we can be a little bit more excited about all the wonderful things that our team is doing. So my team is the Service and Outreach team, and we are tasked with educational and outreach activities for students, educators, local historical societies, museums, and the general public. And in FY25, we advanced existing programs, implemented new ones, and continued to champion historical learning for all audiences. Our educational programs are currently focused mainly on the K-12 audience, and the Vermont History Museum remains a primary location for engaging with Vermont students and learning about their state's history through self-guided tours and hands-on history programs. In the past year, we implemented new scheduling procedures to integrate better with our friends at the State House and Supreme Court, and welcoming students to our capital city. The continued interest in this field trip is reflected in the over 3,800 students that visited the museum last year. Alongside our educational programs, we also undertook a number of projects to update and improve our exhibits and the museum experience, both in Montpelier and Barrie this past year. At the History Museum, we implemented a visitor evaluation program, starting updates to the maple portion of the exhibit a week ago, and completed an accessibility audit. At the History Center, as Daniel mentioned, FY saw the initial opening of our research and exhibition gallery, which now showcases thousands of items from the VHS collection. We have already welcomed some student groups and classes to the space and are planning now for ways to welcome them. Vermont History Day remains a flagship educational program for VHS. This year, we were excited to welcome a record number of students to the state contest, held for the first time at St. Michael's College. We also saw a significantly expanded number who participated in History Day activities in their classroom. Vermont students also saw increased success at the national contest in College Park, Maryland. Successes are due to our expanded outreach efforts and support for students and teachers. Mentioned the 250th is coming up, and so this past fiscal year, we also started work on our All in Vermont, Put Your History on the Map project. This project is a call for Vermont students to study Vermont's local history through inquiry-based research in partnership with local historical societies. Student projects will be shared on an ArcGIS interactive map with a goal to have all 252 towns represented for the 250th. Other 250th preparations and programs included administration of our 250th community planning grants and planning for upcoming 250th exhibits and programs, as Steve has mentioned, which you can find more information on the site. Part of the work that I do is services to Vermont's over 190 local historical societies and museums through our League of Local Historical Societies and Museums, or LHSM. This past year, we held very successful workshops, our virtual roundtables, and a spring conference in November. Our work and direct support of local societies continues to be based on collaboration and sharing. That includes exhibits in our local history gallery in the museum, which featured this past year Fairbanks scales from the Vermont History, the St. John's Garrett History and Heritage Center, Creative Women in Pittsburgh from the Pittsburgh Historical Society, an exhibit on the Rocky Camp meetings. As Jay mentioned, we do also have our activating history program, which has been working with local historical societies to help establish collections priorities, right size their collections, and energize their community engagement strategies. This past year, we welcomed our project coordinator for this initiative, Anne Kirkpatrick, selected and worked with our first cohort of 5 organizations and launched our online resource center. As noted, termination of the IMLS grant in the spring almost caused the project to be canceled. But thanks to the generosity of private donors, including Ruth Blackwell and Willow Van Wagonen and George Burrell, we were able to continue the work as we navigated and continue to navigate federal funding uncertainty. This investment is already paying off, with VHS staff and activating cohort members serving as featured speakers at a forum in Maine on active collections, and Hannah and myself offering a featured article on the project in the most recent issue of the American Alliance of Museums Museum Magazine. Other educational outreach activities included presenting our popular history for homeschoolers classes, implementing new educational program partnerships with local libraries, which one picture on the left is we did it's Build with Gingerbread, which is a great program that Danielle Ferris-Burnett, our museum educator, did with the library. We also shared our knowledge and resources during well-received presentations at conferences, educator workshops, and school in-service programs. Other public programs included our popular virtual speaker series and a new version of our virtual trivia program. So that's what we sort of did for FY25. We have a lot of great educational and outreach programs on tap for this current fiscal year, including continuing the activating program and our all-in project. And we're also looking forward to serving as a host site for the Vermont Alliance of Social Studies Conference and building out new resources and promotional activities for the History Day. Thank you.
Hey, Barbie, that was great. And, you know, she's the biggest working woman in show business. She does an incredible job. We really appreciate her. And now we're going to turn to collections. Amanda Guston, our Director of Collections and Access, is going to tell us what's going on in that area. She's a very hard-working person too, because she runs the town as well as the.
Sorry, I apologize for any listeners or parking difficulties there. Counter studies. So thank you all for joining us today. It's my pleasure to talk a little bit about the work of the Collections and Access Department, which, as Janet described, manages the collections of the Vermont Historical Society, the library and museum collections. And I always, when I talk about this, point out that the second half of our department title is access. We don't just take the stuff in, lock it into a dark basement, and then never let anyone near it again. The past model, I suppose. It's really important to us that we are continuously providing ways for people to interact with the treasures that we hold here at the Vermont Historical Society, whether that is by placing them on exhibit, by doing further research on them, by cataloging them, by providing support to our education and outreach programming, welcoming researchers, you name it. Our priority is always in making sure that our collections are working for Vermont history and not just hiding. I do want to touch base. Our department also often handles statewide research projects, and this was a big one. We spent just under 3 years collecting the history and the experience of COVID-19 here in Vermont. This project, like our 21st Museum Professional project, was also funded by an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant that was also canceled, but as Jan had mentioned earlier, we quick turned around, I think in 36 hours, our final funding request, and luckily this project all closed out neatly. But this project finished this fiscal year and over its time period, collected over 100 oral histories of the experience of COVID-19 in Vermont into an archive on the right hand side. You can see there that they are all available, transcribed and oral histories. We then turned those oral histories into the book that you see on your left there, that we were deeply grateful to Garrett Graff to take some time from his Pulitzer finalist duties to do this book with us. And what I always talked about is the most important part of this is the ongoing legacy of making sure that we are collecting COVID. We continue to add archival and museum objects that document this really crucial period in Vermont's history. Through awareness of this project and through that ongoing work, we are always thinking about the us of 50 years from now when we collect things. What do we wish we had to tell the stories of this moment? And this is a really important one for that question. There we go. All right. I apologize. The pictures are a little bit boring. I do want to embarrass our staff by doing a staged photo of them doing this work, but I want to talk about the sort of two parts of our department here. One is the library, and a huge part of the work we do is the sort of iceberg underneath what you see, which is the mountain of work that we do in continually cataloging, processing, and making available our collections for the public. In this fiscal year, we welcome Steve Capazio as the new librarian at the Vermont Historical Society, and our library staff across the board has made enormous strides in fully wrapping their arms around. Every institution has a backlog, and I'm pleased to say that we now fully have our arms around our backlog and are moving through it pretty darn quickly for us. And we also are adding new volunteers to help process new collections, from interns right on up through retired librarians who just can't get out of the game. We're also implementing new systems and new technology to track all of the different work that we have, all of the different stages that collections are in, as we continue to make these things available to the public. Similar work goes on in museum collections. Whenever we buy storage things, we try to make them in fun colors. Gray and black get boring after a while. One just too. We continue to make significant progress with our museum collections. If you've been to a few of these annual meetings, you know that we are continuing to do a years-long inventory project to fully track, understand, photograph, condition report, and better store every single object in the collections of the Vermont Historical Society. The number we usually say for that is around 30,000, although it keeps growing, which we'll talk about in a moment. So as you can understand, imagine this is an enormous project that we continue on track, if not slightly ahead of schedule for. We've also had really been grateful for some phenomenal intern and volunteer support in this department that help us move forward in this. And a major push for our museum collections in this past fiscal year was the research and exhibition gallery that Eileen spoke of before. There are roughly 1,500 objects in that gallery, and if you can imagine getting every single one out, making sure it was exhibited appropriately, and on, it was a huge push. But we're really grateful that it gives the opportunity for so many people to have quality interactions with our collections. Any questions before I go on to the new additions to the collections? This is a sort of natural pause. Okay, all right. This is often people's favorite part, so we're going to talk a little bit about and I want to emphasize these are just highlights of some of the items that we added to our collections in the past fiscal year. I'll give a little bit of a snapshot about each of them, and we can take questions at the end. First, this really wonderful painting by Francis Horn in the station. This is a museum purchase from Burlington Estate. We are fortunate to have a number of examples of Colburn's work, but this one really leapt out to us. This is about as early as it gets for Colburn's work. It's dated 1935. And of particular interest to us, this dates from his period working with the Works Progress Administration's Federal Artist Project. And in fact, the exhibit label for the Federal Artist Project is still on the back of the painting.
giving it beyond just the obvious appeal of the painting, really superb provenance to a period of Colbert's work that we did not previously have. So this was a really, we had been saying, we'll take another Colbert if, and then it happened. So we're really grateful to have added this to the collection. Solar eclipse material. The solar eclipse happened in the spring of 24, but our collecting of it happened in the fiscal year that followed. So we added a number of materials related to the solar eclipse, the total solar eclipse, to our collection, both in the archival area. We added posters and pamphlets and things like that. And here you can see some examples of the museum collections. This is a stamp, a graphite stamp, and then the glass piece that it creates, both of which were added to the collection. These were designed by Justin Harris of AO Glass. This is a Burlington glowing glass making firm that offered the opportunity for people to come and stamp their own glass. So this stamp was used by people who were making their own souvenirs of the eclipse. And then we also got one of the pieces there. We also added eclipse glasses to the collection with Vermont branding on them. So we collected that, which was a pretty major event for us in that past year. With the opening of the Research and Exhibition Gallery, we were looking around and going, where are some of our collections gaps that really should be represented in the Research Exhibition Gallery? And also, like, who can we talk to who's contemporary that could help us fill those gaps and then could also help us celebrate the opening of the Research and Exhibition Gallery? One of those gaps, surprisingly enough, was cross-country skiing, Nordic skiing. We had quite a bit to document downhill skiing, and thanks to a collection of skiing, who documented ski jumping. But we didn't have a whole lot that represented Nordic skiing. So we reached out to a number of people, and one of them here, Ben Ogden, who is a 2022 graduate of the University of Vermont. And in his senior year, he both won the NCAA championships and competed in the Olympics. He is still currently a professional cross-country skier from Landgrove, Vermont, and he donated a number of his items, including a set of skis, a jersey from the NCAA championships, as well as the Olympics, and a full-body suit that you can see in the Research and Exhibition Gallery. Give us some feedback. We went back and forth on whether the way we displayed the suit was creepy or not. I think it validate that. You know, feedback always welcome. I think he felt a little weirded out to know that his racing suit was on exhibit in the museum, but he was wonderful and gracious and helped us open up the exhibit. And we're grateful that he helped us document like seeing in our collection. Continuing on with contemporary collecting, we are always out there looking for sort of firsts and moments. This small collection from Emma Mulvaney, currently serving mayor of Burlington. She's the first woman and the first openly LGBTQ person to be mayor of Burlington. And I chose this piece, she did a couple of small things to us because this was the summer of the Taylor Swift friendship bracelet, or the spring, winter and spring of it. And so this, we had a lot of campaign material from a lot of politicians of the history of Vermont, but this is our first friendship bracelet. And it is also a piece of campaign material. So it represents sort of an important event in first in Vermont history and also angle that we did not have represented in our collection for political history. This is probably the largest collection that we added during this past fiscal year. The Austin School for the Deaf was founded in 1904 and it closed in 2014. And until about the year 2022, a small group of alumni maintained a museum on the former campus of the Austin School, which is in Brattleboro. And they reached out to us with a couple of other Vermont institutions because they had heard they would lose their space and they needed to close their museum and disperse their collections. So we spoke with them. We worked with them for close to 2 years on the disposition of the collections from their museum, which documented 100 years of education of deaf students. And really, they came from all over New England to study at the Austin School. And we took a fairly large for us collection of both objects, of which you see here, and a really quite large collection of archival material as well. They were lovely to work with. They were deeply, deeply passionate about their school and wonderful stewards of that school's history. And we're grateful now that we can represent this important, really crucially important part of Vermont's story here at the Historical Society for future research. A number of these items are also in the Research and Exhibition Gallery, including, as I mentioned, Herb Holbrook, who was a world champion ski jumper, who graduated from the Austin School. His skis and his materials are on exhibit in the Reg. I think this collection also documents what we see, which is that a lot of these collections span both our museum and our library collections. We get a lot of collections that inform across the totality of the different types of material, and we're always looking to try and make sure that what we take has context in that way. Moving into a very small, but just specifically archival material. I was reviewing all of the items the library took in this past fiscal year, and I said my theme was going to be showing you interesting examples of sort of the broad types of things that we collect. This piece is just a ridiculously charming baby book. This is the baby book of Madge Lewis Clark. It was collected by her mother, Flora Clark. It's the cooings and doings of the baby, as you can see on the left-hand side there. It's from 1903, and Flora documented every couple of days her daughter's growth and their interaction with her. This is both, as I said, incredibly charming, but it also actually does pretty thoroughly represent like what parent-child relationships were like in the very, very early years of the 20th century, what motherhood was expected to be in the early years of the 20th century. So it actually has like social history layers to it beyond just being, in this example I chose, baby got her first picture today at 4 months and she's finally sleeping through the night. So some things are universal, because also give us insight into that. This was a moment of personal privilege. I went to Middlebury College. I had a deep fondness for Dog Tavern, which, as you may know, burned down in the early 2000s. This was offered to us by someone who had also donated a number of other materials. This is a brochure documenting the Dog Tavern. We have actually quite a large menu and restaurant placement at the left. And we are always adding to it, both from past materials and current materials, because restaurants reflect the moment of their time. And this was an interesting example of that. This is from 1999. Also some fun collections from the 80s and 90s. This is a collection of comics. Some of you may know that Marvel Comics has a long history of featuring Rutland, Vermont in its comics. Characters are from there. People are always going there to plot. On the right-hand side, Valkyries are going to Rutland, Vermont. There's a famous annual Halloween parade in Rutland featured in comics. So we got a collection of 8 comics from the 80s and 90s that all depict Rutland. There we go. Last but not least, this is also a collection of material that is sort of unrelated to each other, but all came in through one circumstance, which was Bob Mello, who many of you may know is a longtime friend of the Historical Society, placed his collection of Vermont materials for auction to benefit the Center for Research on Vermont. And thanks to generosity of donors to the Vermont Historical Society, Joe Gallery, we were able to participate in that auction. Purchased a number of materials. This is one of them that I highlight here today. It's actually quite a large one on size. It barely fit on a scanner. So this collection represented both manuscript materials from 3 centuries of Vermont history, some pamphlets, some broadsides, some really wonderful schoolgirl map. And it was all material that was rare, contributed and added to our collections, and then all came from the same source, and we were grateful to have it. So that concludes our very quick review of some of the highlights of collection additions in the last fiscal year. Any questions? All right, Don, what's your question? But I'm they are indeed, so I'll pass it back to them.
seen all the things we're doing and heard gaps that have appeared in our budgeting process, because I mean, we're doing well budget wise, but at the same time, you know, we don't have the resources we've always relied upon. So I'd like to welcome you all to make extra donations this year, if there's any possibility we can do that, so that all the exciting and important things can keep going on. And now I will adjourn this meeting so we can get on to hearing from Jeff Armstrong. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So.
Okay, thank you. And can I have a second? Great. And all in favor, say aye. Opposed? Has anyone ever said opposed? Anyway, we are so appreciative that you all came. Thank you so much. And now we'll get to our speaker. I will tell you that as president, I'm on every committee, which is a lot of meetings. But one of my favorites is the publications committee. And part of the duty of being on that committee is we get a lot of manuscripts submitted to us. And this past year, we don't get a whole lot of murder stories, you know? I mean, I think that's a good thing that Vermont isn't, you know, so that we are getting tons of them. But it got this, and I could not, you know, I'm reading it online and I'm thinking, oh wow, yeah, it's a page turner. This is great. This is fascinating. Oh, good. And I got suddenly to this kind of cliffhanger moment. And that was it. I said, wait, where is the rest? I contacted the group. I said, where's the rest of this man? He hasn't written it yet. I'm like, no, how long am I going to have to wait? No, I was turned out. It was a tough one. I did manage to wait, and he got it done pretty quickly. I was impressed. So anyway, I'll be telling you more. But first, let me say that Jeffrey Amistory has served as Vermont's Attorney General, 1985 to 1997. He has been the Chief Justice of the Vermont State Supreme Court from 1997 to 2004. He was a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership in 2005 to 2014. And is the author of Slavish Shore, The Odyssey of Richard Henry Dana Jr. from Harvard Press 2015. And his new book, the one I was telling you about, is Winter's Time, A Severed Head, A Secret Pledge, and the Murder That Brought America's Most Famous Lawyers to Vermont, published by the Vermont Historical Society in September 2025. With that title, you can resist it. I would now like to welcome Jeffrey Amistory. Thank you.
From roll, born in months, and I hadn't realized until I saw that wonderful display. The Avenger comics, what are the basic wrong? That starts to explain a lot of things about my boyhood. And that's trying to slow.
Your career as an adventure.
Yes. Thank you. It's okay. Well, there are many to whom I owe thanks for help in getting Winter's Time from idea to book. But let me acknowledge the most important of all. Thank you to the Vermont Historical Society for having faith in the project and faith in this office. I've often been asked what prompted my interest in state versus winters. And when I replied that I began in my first 4 years in 1993, my customers several decades younger have been enough to hide their disbelief. But for those who think that was impossibly long ago, my guess is that for a few here, it seems like only yesterday. Seems that way to me. And it was over 50 years. A young lawyer waiting my first appearance in court. I was standing in the lawyer's room at Woodstock Courthouse. And to mask my anxiety, I asked one of the senior lawyers, they're all senior to me, of course, said, what's that picture on the wall? And they said, no, those are participants in the most famous murder trial ever to occur in this courthouse. That prompted my interest, but it really was not until 2 years ago, when as an assistant attorney general, I was researching a case and came across the 1929 opinion of the Vermont Supreme Court in State versus Winters. And to my astonishment, it read, appearing for the defendant, Clarence Darrow of Chicago, Illinois. And here again are for those of us for whom 1973 and it's only yesterday, it's difficult to convey how extraordinary it was to read that Clarence Darrow had appeared before the Vermont Supreme Court in the 1920s. It was a time when the advent of radio and the newspaper war created an insatiable appetite for celebrity and for crime. An appetite, of course, still with us 100 years later. And Clarence Darrow was a celebrity in a decade that idolized celebrities. He was as famous in the roaring 20s as Charles Lindbergh and Charlie Chaplin. A fervent opponent of capital punishment in a time when states raced each other to install the election share, Vermont until 1914. Darrow was famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, for saving clients from the death penalty. For me to learn that Clarence Darrow had come to Vermont in the 1920s, it's like learning that Babe Ruth had left the New York Yankees in 1927, come Bishop for the Rutland Royals, semi-protein. When I proposed as a subtitle to Winter's Time, A Secret Pledge, The Severed Head, and the murder that brought Clarence Darrow to Vermont, I got a reality check from Andrew Liptek. Andrew did an informal survey among prospective readers until the somewhat younger cohort than my prospective readers. And he said in his survey, no one had ever heard of Clarence Darrow. He said, but he was America's most famous lawyer. So Andrew said, well, let's use that in subtitle. So that's how it reads. My research for Winter's Time began in earnest about 2 years ago. I've taken a detour, as was noted. I don't claim that serving as Chief Justice and Attorney General makes Winter's Time a good book, but it did give me a perspective of the challenges faced by the prosecution and the Chief Justice in this extraordinary case. The resources at Historical Society and at the Vermont State Archives were a great help, of course. And to my amazement, the archives had a 3-volume, 1,000-page transcript of the murder trial of State versus Plaintiffs. Clarence Darrow played no part at all in the trial. And I had intended, when I first contemplated this book, not to talk very much about the trial at all. It was only in reading the trial that I was stunned to learn that the state's special prosecutor had introduced into evidence of the trial the severed head of Cecilia Goldman, the murder victim. A severed head is, as it's noted, part of the subtitle. I was not asked to change that. There's no question it's sparked an interest in the book. I was unfamiliar with the world of true crime podcasts, but it's a big world apparently. I just did a podcast for multiple Tories. Give you some ideas of the kind of questions they asked. They asked more about the severed head and they have in Vermont. But I would not have written this book, and the Vermont Historical Society would not have published it unless the trial and its aftermath provided readers with some glimpse issues of the roaring twenties in rural Vermont, of gender, of justice, of celebrity. Example one. It became apparent to me as Richard's time took shape that the events that occurred before Clarence Darrow had ever heard of John Winters were critical to my story. Part one, if you will. And it's that part that I will speak of today. An early chapter of Winter's Time is entitled Cecilia's Day. It represents my best attempt to describe the last day of her life, November 6, 1926. What I meant by Cecilia's Day as well, an effort to try to capture what it was like to be a so-called modern in the 1920s of Vermont. As students of history here know, it's difficult to reconstruct history in any event, and it's extraordinarily difficult. The material is sparse, as it was about Cecilia development. But I don't think I missed the mark when I concluded that she was a remarkable woman for any time, but especially for her time and in her profession. She held what was probably the most senior executive position of any woman in Vermont in 1926. And she held it in a male-dominated industry, in a male-dominated world. She was a leading machine tool expert in her own right, in a business that was literally revolutionizing American industry. Windsor was centered in Precision Valley, the name for the companies that comprise the foundation of the machine tool industry. Precision Valley has been compared to Silicon Valley in its significance to American prosperity. I think that comparison is apt, and it's apt in another way. It was as rare for a woman to be a leader in the early days of Silicon Valley as it was rare for Cecilia Goldman to be a leader in Precision Valley in the 1920s. For many Windsor women and men, she was the epitome of a modern woman. She owned her own house, she owned her own car. The fashions of the 20s complemented her slender figure. She was a successful, single, 43-year-old woman who was proud of her profession. On the evening of November 6, 1926, she took special care with her appearance because she was meeting her boss, Frank Cohn. The next morning, he was dead. Her body was not discovered until November 8th, Monday. But on Sunday, the day before, Windsor residents were talking about a different crime. At 2 a.m. that Sunday morning, an intruder had broken into the Windsor home of Margaret Evers. She was being cared for by a nurse who fought off the intruder. The nurse was badly beaten. She could not identify who attacked her, who ran away when neighbors heard the commotion. When on the morning of Monday, November 8th, Goldman did not appear for work, Frank Cohn went to her house. He found her dead body on the sleep porch. Cohn went back to Windsor for Goldman's doctor. They returned to the house with police. At the house, the doctor lifted the sheet covering the body. After the trial, he had replaced the sheet. The doctor said, "No, I dropped the thing. I was so horrified." Murderous attack on two women stirs Windsor to high pitch at my Vermont tribute. He characterized the murder as the most brutal murder in the history of Vermont. The break-in at the Everett's house magnified public interest. The prominence of William Maxwell Evarts in American history and the significance of the Evarts family then and before and in the 1920s contributed to extraordinary newspaper coverage. There was, as there always is in notorious cases, a demand for information. Who were the suspects? How many were there? Were there any witnesses? Did the police have a murder weapon? The sheriff did not know, or he claimed he did. Windsor police had no clues. Vermont State Police was not in existence, wouldn't be established for another 20 years. But Vermont's Attorney General knew what every Attorney General knows, including this one. In a notorious case, you need the best file lawyer, and that's seldom the Attorney General. J. Ward Carver had just been elected Attorney General of Vermont for his first full term, 1 week before Sullivan's murder. Carver went immediately to Governor Billings and asked for the appointment of a special prosecutor. They agreed to appoint White River Junction Raymond Trainer, who many consider the best trial lawyer in Vermont. It was an inspired choice, but Clarence Darrow would argue to the Vermont Supreme Court that Trainer was determined to get a conviction irrespective of the fairness of the trial. But first, the prosecution needed a suspect. Windsor County Sheriff Wallace Fairbanks knew where they could find one. The Vermont Tribune put the investigative approach more directly than prosecutors would have liked. And I quote, Windsor has the prison. Each day seeks to release prisoners. Some of these men are of the lowest type. Those in charge of the investigation thought here was the solution to the mystery of the murder. It was not initially clear why John Winters was targeted, beyond the fact that he had served time, sexual assault. He had done some work for the Evers family, and he was an employee of the Cohen Automatic Company. Winters had been released from prison in 1919, and in the 7 years since had lived in Windsor without any trouble. He was married, raising a family. But he was taken to the state prison, put in the death cell. He was held there for the next 5 days. Yeah, he was not arrested. He was neither entitled to a lawyer nor entitled to remain silent. So-called Miranda warnings that require both were 40 years off. That didn't come until 1966. And in fact, in the 1920s, the Vermont Supreme Court had allowed a confession made from a defendant who was chained to the floor of a cell, solitary confinement. Sheriff Fairbanks told reporters that Winters would soon confess, quote, because he will not be able to stand up under the cruel grilling of State Detective Brown. Brown was the Attorney General's investigator, and he did indeed try a number of good cop, bad cop tactics to get Winters to confess. Most notably, he brought Winters to the home of Margaret Evans and had him stand over the invalid's bed in the presence of the nurse. Brown then told Winters that the nurse had ID'd him as the man who broke into the Everett's house. When the detective had the nurse say it again to Winters, Winters said, then take me out and hand you. But he still would not admit anything to State Detective Brown. On the 5th day of confinement, Detective Brown asked the special prosecutor to come to the Windsor prison to see if they could bring some kind of admission out of Winters. They could not. Prison warden had described Winters as a tough nut. He was either that or he was not the murderer. The state had either to arrest Winters or to release him. They chose to arrest him. He was charged on November 13, 1926, with breaking and entering the Everett's house, the assault on the nurse, and the murder of Cecilia Gull. Sheriff Fairbanks described the case as ironbound from the beginning. Special prosecutor Trainer knew better, and so did Springfield attorney Herbert Tupper, who was assigned by the court to represent Winters. Tupper was not Clarence Darrow, but he was good enough that they became friends when they worked together on the on the appeals of the Vermont Supreme Court. Windsor residents and readers of newspapers all over the Northeast thought Winters would plead guilty to murder. But Winters' lawyer had a different plan. He asked, if my client has been arrested for murder, on what evidence has the arrest been made? It was a good question. Special prosecutor knew he could not answer. The defense lawyer demanded the prosecution present its evidence at a preliminary hearing. So many Windsor residents, to say nothing of reporters, clamored to get into the hearing that they moved it to the Windsor Armory. There were actually 3 hearings, each with hundreds of spectators at each one. At each one, too, special prosecutor trainer found a reason not to present evidence. At the first, he said the nurse was sick. At the second, he said Detective Brown was sick. And at the third, he said he was sick. He was playing the deep game. He was stalling so that he could convene a grand jury. Grand juries are seldom used in Vermont to indict a defendant. In the 12 years I was Attorney General, we never used a grand jury to charge a defendant. Typically, defendants are charged by information that contain affidavits that then give the judge a chance to look at what evidence the state has to make the arrest. But grand juries have some benefits for prosecutors. They're secret. Defense lawyers cannot appear. It's been said that a grand jury, that a prosecutor could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich, and there's some truth to that. In any event, you got us grand jury in December 1926. They charged John Winters with the first degree murder of Cecilia Belvin, a crime punishable by death. The trial of State versus Winters began in January 1927. The state's case was based entirely on circumstantial evidence. It was critical for special prosecutor to persuade the judge to allow the admission into evidence of the assault at the Everett's house. That would allow the prosecutor to call the nurse as a witness, and the nurse was the only person who would identify John Winters. But even with that evidence, the special prosecutor did not believe he could convict Winters without more. No, without more was Exhibit 35. Exhibit 35 was the certificate of Cecilia Belvin. It had been removed by the medical examiner because state needed to demonstrate, the prosecutor needed to demonstrate the state's theory of the weapons used to murder Cecilia Belvin. Gentlemen of the jury, said Trainer in his opening statement, women were not allowed in the jury for Vermont until 1943. The state will show you the weapons that could have made the wounds. Police had taken from Winters' home a chisel and an automobile spring. Trainer intended to show the jury how the wounds were made with a demonstration unprecedented in Vermont criminal history, and as far as I can determine, unprecedented in the history of criminal trials anyplace in the United States. He did so by calling to the stand Dr. Fred Kent, the state's medical examiner. Trainer began with this question. Dr. Kent, at the time you performed the autopsy on Miss Belvin, did you take some part of her body away with you? Answer, yes, sir. Question, what did you take? Answer, I took the head. Question, and have you, Miss Belvin said? Answer, I had. Have you it here in court? Answer, yes. I was shocked, even as a prosecutor, full transcript, nearly 100 years later. You can imagine the shock of the jury and persons in that courtroom. And to a lawyer, there's something startling in the next page of the transcript. When the judge asked the defense Is there any objection to the introduction of the severed head into evidence? The defense lawyers respond, no objection. The failure to object is virtually inexplicable. The evidence was so prejudicial and so likely to inflame a jury that there's no question that the Vermont Supreme Court would have reversed the conviction. But by failing to object, the issue was not preserved or appealed. Although the trial would last several days after the introduction of Exhibit 35, and include the special prosecutor's devastating cross-examination of John Winters when he took the stand in his own defense, the presumption of innocence was gone, and so too was the chance that a jury listening to court's instruction in reasonable doubt would give it much weight. On February 18, 1927, 29 days after the trial of John Winters had begun, the case went to the jury. They returned a guilty verdict in Providence. Judge Frank Thompson had one question for defense lawyer Herbert Thompson. Do you expect to take this case to the Supreme Court? Thompson's reply was brief and to the point. Yes, Your Honor. In May 1927, 3 months after John Winters was convicted of murder and faced the death penalty, Clarence Darrow was speaking at Dartmouth. The 7-year-old Darrow had just announced his retirement as a practicing lawyer. It was big news. The New York Times reported that Darrow planned to lecture and write. Dartmouth seemed a good place for him to start his lecture tour. His son, Paul, was a 1904 Dartmouth graduate. When Darrow finished his lecture, Why I Am Opposed to Capital Punishment, a student said a woman had a letter for him. Darrow, writing to his son Paul the next day, wrote, I told the boy he was crazy. No such thing could have happened. In 1904, Paul's horse, spooked by a steam whistle, had fatally trampled the 5-year-old boy. Paul Darrow, devastated by the accident, had given the boy's mother a letter with a pledge. If she or any member of her family ever needed legal help, Paul promised that his father would give it. Now, 23 years, the pledge was being redeemed. I need your help, said Mrs. Arthur Cooley to America's most famous lawyer. My nephew, John Winters, was on death row in Vermont. And that is part. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah. Can you say something about the nature of Vermont's medical examiner system at that time? How official was the medical examiner who brought the head in court?
Yeah, so I noted in the book that I used the phrase medical examiner because that's fairly familiar now to us. But at the time, his title was director of the Department of Hygiene, I think. And Ken was actually the assistant. He was the assistant. He wasn't the chief of the department either. And as you said, that department had several other responsibilities. And so, without, in my own judgment, making some educated guesses, I think that the prosecutor probably was able to and did intentionally select Dr. Ken. He was the younger of the medical examiners as someone he could work with in terms of putting together was rather extraordinary. Except what to your question, it certainly wasn't the kind of medical examiner set up for the CNL. Yeah.
we have to get anybody's permission to do that to her body.
I'm sorry, I didn't like-
Did the medical examiner need to get permission? Anybody to,
Well, no, because there's some work,
but like extended family, I mean, like,
now, as part of the autopsy, so they did it, the one question I got, right, just did a program at the Wizard Historical Society, in which I held my breath because I knew there were some folks that were still distantly related to lawyers or murder or even murderers. But a question I got from someone there was, why was it necessary in the autopsy to sever the head? That's a very good question. At least, without knowing, one plausible answer is wasn't necessary, except that's what the prosecutor thought would work. But permission would have been required for the autopsy. Yeah.
You mentioned that the doctor who examined the corpse of the murder scene then dropped the cloth saying it was too horrible.
Yeah.
Was that any of that ever filled later into the case?
Well, that was
follow up.
Yeah, this is he testified in trial. Actually, and the doctor was a close friend, personal friend, and was in fact treating Cecilia Gulliver. So he was called as a witness at trial, and along with others who've been here when he studied the body, and that act that I used that actually from the trial, because in the book I described briefly their relationship. He was a friend and a physician, and so it was very easy to understand why horrified his reaction. But the prosecutors, of course, used that evidence. Used that testimony in the trial to speak to the brutality of the murder, which, irrespective of the substance of the evidence, terrible.
Yeah. I'd like to start out by saying I have a personal interest in this. More my grandfather is cousin. So I heard as a kid a lot of this stuff. It's pieces of camera. But my question to you, I've read it. Well, do you yourself think that there was enough evidence to convict John Winters without all the law and whatever? Or do you think that there was a possibility of ultimate suspect?
Yeah, well, that's actually a more subtle question than I usually get. Is do I think Winters committed a murder? And my answer for that is let each reader have to make up their own mind. But the subtlety of the question is a good one because there was of course, I'm trying to be careful about what you admit as evidence. There was no question that me anyway, I think anyone else that by admitting such an inflammatory piece of evidence as the head of the victim, it couldn't possibly have been a fair trial. And so, although I'll not reveal my own personal opinion about guilt or innocence, I will say it was not a fair trial. Yeah. But anyway, tell me what you think.
I know when I read it, I was like, what? I grew up on TV channel. I'm like, this would have been, you're on the right. Yeah. I think the booster back then, there weren't as many.
Yeah, I think in the book I give something I try to justify under what possible theory or in what world were the defense lawyers living didn't check. The only thing I can come up with is I thought one of the lawyers believed that he could by using the same exhibit, demonstrated that the chisel and the other instrument couldn't possibly cause those wounds. But again, well, it just turns into one of the really terrible strategic mistakes by defense lawyer, and I think you'll see why. Yeah.
I'm really curious, since I've researched two other line size. One of them, several of the names you mentioned today were involved. Did you look for or find any actual official documents other than the transcript? Because in my cases, I can't turn out anything except for that's a difference.
What else? What else would you?
Police reports, full evidence.
Yeah, no, yeah, same difficulties. I mean, I mean, obviously the transcript, the book could never have been written without the transcript. You know, the reason the Windsor County court records are at the state archives is because they were concerned about flooding, and they moved a lot in there for time ago. You could go back and look at, I could find Windsor's arraignment on his, when he was charged with sexual assault, but nothing in the police reports, and not to give away anything, but I needed some help, which, you know, archivists of the best in the world, to find out where and when he had died, where he had died, and I was able to find that. But same difficult in terms of, you know, police reports that be non-existent. So.
Just to be clear, there were two murders.
No, one murder and one assault.
But on the same night.
On the same night, correct.
And they both worked at home.
Pardon?
And they both worked at home, Blanchard.
Well, the defendant worked at home, Blanchard, and the victim was.
The assault victim, I mean,
But the assault victim was, she was, Margaret Edwards was she was actually 34, but she was an inmate. She was a descendant of the Edwards family, third generation now. And very few know Windsor at all. You know, the Edwards estates, the houses, are, and it really was a compound. I mean, the Edwards family was, I mean, again, I'd actually practiced law for Windsor. Had some knowledge of the prison, but not much knowledge of the Edwards family. And you know, they were an extraordinary, well-known family. 4 or 5 presidents came into Windsor to visit the Edwards. So it's still even in the 1920s were significant. And another relation, Max Portman's famous visitor. That's where he came all the time. It's called Paradise. In fact, I have a chapter called Paradise because that's where the assault actually takes place.
So was there any relationship between those two women?
Between which two?
The one that was assaulted and the one that was killed?
No, it's a good question. I think well, yes, they certainly knew each other because they were. Sure, Galvin would have known the Edwards, would have known. And again, one of the ones that still, the population be much different than 5,000 people. Everyone knew everything, for sure. The Edwards, and we know it. Cecilia Galvin would know everyone in the Edwards didn't question that.
The proximity, was there in the same neighborhood?
Yeah, there's again proximity in Windsor is easy. All right. Thanks very much.
so much, and having read the whole book, I can tell you, it really is worth reading. And great for Christmas giving, because we never probably know it. Thank you so much, that was. And I want to thank all of you for attending our meeting, we really appreciate you here, we appreciate the people who are out there somewhere. And those of you who are here, there's some light refreshments. We have redone recently the central hallway here. And you are also welcome to chat with the speakers and explore the wonders of the building while we're here. So, and we have a little bookshop set up out in the hall, so that if you want to buy any books, you can have a little look through there as well. So thank you very much for coming. Take care.